We give you a title, we make you a new badge. Ta-da! You must be a leader. If only it were that easy. So, I always recommend to people, and now I've formalized it that I'm sort of in a position to be able to do so, is really get a mentor.
Clock in, scrub up, and join us behind the red line. You're listening to First Case, a perioperative podcast bringing you exciting interviews, engaging discussions, and innovative solutions that are changing the way patients receive surgical care. Each episode, we talk to frontline staff, perioperative leadership, and nursing entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the back table to the boardroom, from wheels in to wheels out, we tackle the real-life issues affecting the OR. Whether you're tuning in for surgical service education or inspiration, we're glad you're here. And now it's time to roll back and start the first case.
On this final episode of the season dedicated to professional development, Melanie and I speak with Jennifer Misajet, COO and CNO at Mercy One, and we're going to be talking to her about leadership, specifically her journey into leadership. And I think when you hear some of the fundamentals, her passion and her energy, you may be motivated to either go back into leadership or try your hand at it by the time we're done talking today.
I agree. Jen's energy is contagious, and I get excited listening to her talk and the passion that she has for bringing people into leadership and helping people see the value in it. And it's something that you should consider, something you should think about, but also her story, how she moved into leadership. There's just a lot of great takeaways, and she's really a great one to round out this season. I don't even know what else to say. She's fantastic.
Just leave it at that. Yeah. I'll tell you, I'm a little sad that we're wrapping up because this has been one of my favorite seasons, and this episode does not disappoint as we close it out, everybody. So stay with us. We're going to be right back, just a short break, and then Jennifer Misajet.
I'm Melanie Perry.
And I'm Justin Poulin.
A 17 Studios production, you're listening to First Case.
Joining us now is Jennifer Misajet, COO and CNO at Mercy One, and we are wrapping up this season talking about leadership. And Jen, your journey into leadership, as this season's been completely dedicated to professional development. And I know there's lots of people out there that are going to either be thrust into leadership based on the environment that we're in today with the workforce shortages and challenges that are there. But there's also a lot of people that's something that they want and know that they want. And your story, I think, is going to really help people put that into context and really understand what that might be like for them. So thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So why don't we start, Jen, just talk about yourself a little bit. And it doesn't even, we're going to obviously talk about your journey into leadership and your experience. So we certainly don't need to make a spoiler at the very beginning of the episode, but can you just talk about your background and maybe even like what even interested you about nursing to begin with?
Sure. That's a great way to start. My heart really is in nursing. I've had a long journey, but, I always come back to the fact that I'm a nurse. My very, very first job when I got out of high school, I worked in sterile processing while I was waiting to go to nursing school. So it was a good way to find out if I liked it. And it was also a good way to get me interested in the operating room, because if I got all my work done, I could watch surgery. So I really developed a passion for that early on. And as I got more familiar, got my nursing credentials, started working in the world of healthcare, I really had a desire to make change on a larger scale instead of just sort of one patient at a time or one day at a time. So I really felt like leadership was a way to let me make change on a larger scale and impact more people, both patients and staff.
I really love that you have that background in sterile processing as well. I mean, especially as you move into leadership, really just talking about how the two departments really work together, being able to speak to that department and understand their plight. And, I don't know how far back we're going here, but I can only imagine what it was like. I know what it was like 10, 15 years ago. I can only imagine what it was like before that with just trying to have some real straightforward direction. I mean, I still think it's a challenge in terms of guidelines and really ironing out that world versus what we have the luxury of with the operating room.
Well, there really weren't as many guidelines. When I think of some of the things we did back then, really because we didn't know any better and the science wasn't there. But in many ways, it was really collaborative because sterile processing was often right in the middle of the OR. And so instead of some of the tension that you see today between the two departments, we really worked together a lot. And most nurses that worked in the operating room were really competent in sterile processing. I think as the science has evolved, the field has evolved. I think some people probably still think they are competent, but sterile processing has really evolved as its own specialty with its own set of unique skills to be learned and leadership to be had. And so I think some of the people that just used to say, I don't want to work in the OR anymore, I think I'll go run sterile processing, it's probably not a valid thing to do anymore unless you have the training to back it up because it has evolved so far. But I will say those days where we were all working together, at the end of the cases where we were all trying to get the stuff ready for the next day, even though the policies and Amy weren't there, I think we worked a lot better together and had some great teamwork and some really fun times before kind of the future pushed us apart from each other.
For all the progress, maybe it cost us our relationship, maybe just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. And I think in a way, though, we're better for it because I think sterile processing has emerged as a separate and distinct entity. It is coming into its own with all the understanding of how doing it right means doing it safe, for patients. And so I've always tried to stay really, really close as part of my overall periop leadership to what's going on in sterile processing. So I really, really understand and I can support when someone comes to me with something that needs to be changed.
For sure. So I want to go into your journey a little bit more. As you decided you wanted to make change, you wanted to be a leader. Is there anybody that mentored you? Anybody that you could look back to and say, man, they really influenced my career, or this person was really they just really taught me a lot?
Yeah, I've had a couple really great mentors. One of my earliest mentors when I first got into leadership, I actually had a surgical tech on our 3 to 11 shift in a level 1 trauma center in New Jersey. And she was amazing. She definitely saw me for the newbie that I was, even though I was their boss, because, at that time I really was sort of in leadership to build my career as opposed to where I am now, where it's to build other people. But she recognized that I was pretty good clinically. And if I was going to be their boss, she probably needed to teach me the ropes. And she taught me a lot about listening to the team, paying attention to what's going on around you, not getting too cocky, don't be a know-it-all. and through her sort of mentorship, and it was quite informal, I really understood how to be a leader that people would respect and follow and like. And I think as I've gone on in my leadership journey, I've been really fortunate to be with some visionary people that helped me understand that if you let people go and let people grow and play to their strengths and challenge them, they will just they'll just develop and give you so much more than you ever expected. And I just really appreciate that legacy that they left with me. Those are people I still think about to this day because they shaped me into the leader I am.
Absolutely. I don't think you can put a price tag on the value that you get from a mentor at all. And all of us need mentors in our career, whether we're deciding to go into leadership or not. It's not just leaders who need mentors. All of us need to look to others with more experience and more training and that wisdom that they can pass on. And I think the responsibility also falls to us as we advance in our careers and as we grow, that we also pay it forward, I guess, and pick up those mentoring roles and invest in the up and coming generation for sure. I don't think you can say enough about the value of a mentor in your career.
Absolutely. And you said something really important that when you get to a point in your career, if you're going from novice to expert, I think it's super important, whether you're in a formal leadership role or not, that you start to mentor the next generation of people so that you really can reinforce and share all the good lessons you learn instead of holding all that information in. It just makes everybody better. And I do think sometimes people come to that almost organically. They're like, I've learned so much. I've had so much shared with me. It's time to share back so that people from the next generation do have those mentors and those people they look up to. I think what's happened with COVID and, just what's going on in healthcare right now, some of those people are not as available as they used to be. I mean, I was lucky. There were a lot of senior people around when I was learning to lead. But now so many people have left the profession, and a lot of people you see in leadership roles with 2 years experience, you would have had to have a decade before. And I wonder sometimes, where they're going to get the guidance that I was fortunate enough to have.
You're right. You're absolutely right. So that actually kind of leads to my next question. What did you do to train and prepare in order to become a leader? I mean, some people aren't fortunate enough to have, 10 years of experience. Here they are with 1 year or maybe 1 month and suddenly they're in charge because there's nobody else. But if you have the opportunity to train and invest and prepare, what did you do? And what advice, I guess, would you give to somebody else considering leadership?
Oh, God, that's a great question. I would say be curious. I still, even to this day, have a really high degree of curiosity. I just have interest in so many things. And I think that's what got me started, because I looked at leadership and I said, wow, those people are making really important decisions. How do they know what to do? And how do they know how to decide? And so as I got curious about that, I started really studying, what are the standards? And AORN was still very active when I was starting in my leadership journey. And in that curiosity of really understanding perioperative practice and what the standards are, and not just how we do things, but why. I think I started almost as an informal leader because I had some knowledge and I had that background. And as I kept being curious and kept wanting to know and had that desire to learn more, I realized that there's some natural attributes in that curiosity that transfer well to a formal leadership role. So that made me start seeking out, at the very beginning, sort of specialty lead roles and charge nurse roles that just led into more kind of formal management positions. But I always tell everybody, you can lead from where you are. You have a lot of influence, you have curiosity, you have knowledge. And so in a way, you need to own that and be a leader at wherever you are in your journey.
It's interesting. We've talked about this several times, that there's really no formal training that is part of a nursing program. And a lot of organizations don't really invest in some sort of like leadership training or management training. And so, we may be promoted out of just, clinical excellence, but that doesn't necessarily translate, right? So I want to kind of, ask this question from another angle, but one that really can provide some advice to people out there, because that could be another thing for somebody. Like, they might think that they're interested, but they might be like, oh, I'm not the all-star on the team. And so it doesn't fit me. And, I don't have any training. Like we talked a lot earlier this season about limiting beliefs with Lindsay Brown on this show. And, that's been a theme. All of these have interconnected really nicely. And as we're wrapping up this season, I can't think of a better way to tie all of these things together. But if a nurse out there is interested in leadership, but they know there's kind of that training and education gap for them, there's got to be resources and ways to approach that, that anybody who's really self-motivated can still, get a good start. Do you have any ideas or recommendations for them?
I do. And I actually have some things I've done, now as a leader, because you're so right. That is a gap. I think we give you a title, we make you a new badge. Ta-da! You must be a leader. If only it were that easy. So, I always recommend to people, and now I've formalized it that I'm sort of in a position to be able to do so, is really get a mentor. And by that, I mean a peer. So if you take a job as a charge nurse, or you take a job as a manager or a director, VP, doesn't matter. Find somebody in that organization that's doing the role that you're doing. And I've formalized that in many of the places that I've worked. So it really is a true partnership, because they're going to help you understand how to do things around here, because I think that's the part that's missing. It's the how we do things around here. Because yes, you're clinically great. You may understand the department, but it's all the mechanics that a leader has to do to carry out the role. So I strongly recommend that people find someone at their level in the organization and pair up, or ask their leader, hey, is there somebody you can pair me up with? Somebody that I can just check in with as a phone a friend for questions. In the peri-op world, it is very different. So sometimes you think, gosh, is a med-surg manager going to be able to help me? And the answer is yes, because they know how to get in and approve time cards and do all these things that might be totally new when you were a rock star in the OR 2 weeks ago, and now you feel like a novice. I think that really helps. The other thing I'm a big proponent of, and you shouldn't sort of be surprised to hear it here, because I'm really proud to be a member of the CCI board for competency and credentialing. Certification matters. There are so many resources out there for professional certification. And in studying for and obtaining that certification, you really get foundational skills that you can apply to your leadership career. It'll give you that confidence that when you are making a decision, you're making a really good decision based on facts and evidence, not just, oh my, I'm the leader. I'm getting paid to make a decision. I have to make one. So I'm a really strong proponent that invest in yourself and your own professional development, and then find that buddy to get you the mechanics of the organization you're in.
Yeah, the operative C being competency there. And, I also want to tie something into another theme, which is networking. And we talked a lot about networking in terms of professional growth, but not so much as a means to leadership. And I like how you put that into context, right? And so, you might get a peer who's a mentor who understands the organization, but you could also find somebody who does your job at other organizations or who has done that job several times and reach out to them on LinkedIn or, through colleagues, right? Like you mentioned, you're involved with CCI. I imagine your network is incredibly broad because you got involved. Do you want to just add a little component about even the larger picture of networking and being involved in professional trade organizations or certifying bodies or any other kind of group that broadens your network?
Oh, absolutely. And I do think that's part of being a leader, because you do want to broaden your span and you need to look external, not just internal. And it's so funny that you said that. I have people in my network And I'm just going to be interested who's listening to this podcast going, she calls me all the time. I call her all the time. I mean, once you make those connections, whether it's, I called somebody yesterday in facilities and plant operations because I was worried about wet packs and I knew we had dealt with it in another organization. I'm like, let's talk through that, risk assessment we did and the problem solving. It's hugely validating to have that network of people. It's kind of like your tribe. And through LinkedIn, I never would have known like Hank Balch if I hadn't just started following his crazy antics on LinkedIn and said, this is the guy to know. I mean, he's elevated SPD. And when I had a problem a while ago with scopes, I reached out to him. He got back to me in 10 minutes and said, I don't know the answer. Here's a guy in Germany who does. And so I emailed him. He emailed me back. And I do think it's that circle. It may start small, but as you network and you connect, that circle gets bigger and bigger and bigger so that you can, I think, benefit sort of the profession as a whole, because there are all these people working together to make sure everybody can solve those patient problems and you're not working in isolation. And I kind of tell people as a leader, I like to have a big tent and I like to have a lot of people under my tent. I'm not an independent decision maker where I say, this is my way. So I think that's really helped. I have probably over 500 people on LinkedIn that I'm connected with. And it's really people that I've made some type of connection with for a really good reason. And you draw back on those people even 3-5 years later to say, remember when we talked about this? I want to talk about that again, or I have a question about that. And I think people are much less competitive and much more collaborative when it's in the phase of networking as opposed to something else.
One of the things I talk about when I give a presentation about social media and healthcare, and I've given it actually for Jim Stavinsky's CCI, the pre-op nursing elective that he does. I've given it a couple times there and a couple other places, but it's what you're talking about, the beauty of networking and what we see in the value on social media and LinkedIn. When I'm in the hospital, I have the people in my facility, and it's a few people for sure, but I'm limited by the walls. Well, when I build my network and it goes out on LinkedIn, suddenly my 4 walls are no longer 4 walls, but they are global. And I can have that person in Germany. Somebody reached out to me yesterday in France, and then I've talked to somebody over here in China and somebody over here in Alabama or Texas. And our network grows as we reach out. But there's all these experts doing our job that are doing the same thing we are, that are passionate about what we're doing, and we can pull on their expertise. Why wouldn't we? So I agree 100% with that networking value that we can have, not only as leaders, all of us in healthcare have people we can connect with and reach out to and learn from.
And I think as a new leader, when you said, why wouldn't we? I think sometimes there is some hesitancy because sometimes as a new leader, you really think, I should know the answer. I should absolutely be able to answer this question without help. I don't know why people think that, but it's very, very common when you're starting your leadership journey. And I think as I've gone along, what the real key is, you don't have to have the answer. You have to ask better questions. And in that asking better questions, you can use your resources and not be afraid to reach out. And it's a very two-way street. It's not hierarchical. If somebody says to me, hey, I want to know how to do this. The state just came in and said this and that. I immediately will jump in and say, here's what I would do. Here's what I would say. Is it going to get you out of where you are? And there's no hierarchy. There's no embarrassment. There's just, what can we do that's the best for the patient and the best for the situation? And I think as it takes a little while for new leaders to become comfortable not having to have all the answers and be okay just asking questions.
Well, there's that, I guess, I can relate to, I can remember when I was newly in charge of an OR, and it's like, well, they put me in charge. I should know something, but I don't. But, you don't want to seem incompetent, or you don't want people to think you're a moron or whatever. And what if I ask this question and everybody else in the OR that I'm supposed to be in charge of, they already know the answer and I'm just spacing and I can't remember. And we forget that we're human and we can't possibly know everything. And,
No, you
and you
can't.
can't.
And I think you should be humble about it too. I mean,
Yeah.
I had a situation like that when I was working in Seattle and we were working on dress code, one of the favorite things to work on for perioperative services. And we were talking about hats. And the guidance had changed on hats as far as not taking them off between cases. I wasn't up on that. And we were in this big room and there's tons of staff there. And we were talking through this attire policy. And this gal, I was so proud of her. She raised her hand and said, the standards and guidelines have changed. You're not supposed to take your hat off between cases. And it was something I was not current on. And so I stopped right there and I said, thank you very much. We need to be able to speak up when there's either misinformation or lack of information happening. And just because I'm the leader doesn't mean I'm right. And so that was a really, really good example because everybody in the room immediately felt, wow, this is a human being. She's sitting right here admitting she didn't know that. And it became much more collaborative, even in a discussion about surgical attire, to really acknowledge that there is expertise all over your organization. It's not on your badge or in your title.
For sure. Absolutely. But we have unofficial leaders all over the place. But we've talked a lot about new leaders and a lot of maybe hurdles or things that new leaders need to think about. But there are also people already in leadership. What are some takeaways for people maybe already in leadership that they can think about to continue to grow as leaders as well?
One thing I think about is that real responsibility that we have as leaders. And it's hard for me to articulate, but I think I will try, especially for either a seasoned leader or somebody who feels like, I've got this. This isn't my first leadership job. I think going through the pandemic and really emerging on the other side, the gravity and the responsibility that comes with that leadership role has really come home to me. It's a large responsibility. It's not something you can just be half-hearted about because especially when things were going really crazy and being very chaotic, people looked to their leaders for stability, for calm, for direction. And I think as an experienced leader, that's easier to bring to the table. But I think now when you're looking at all this young staff and staff that are just very unsettled, that ability to project calm and understanding and empathy and really just create an environment of safety and trust is incredibly, incredibly important today because people don't feel sure and they are looking to their leaders for some sense of guidance. And I would expand on that even a little more to say, as you have to be transparent too, because I think people are guessing that there are other things going on. They always think there's either some hidden agenda or, something that leadership knows that they're just not telling us. And I think it's really important, especially now in unsettled times, for experienced leaders to say, I'm telling you what I know right now. We said this frequently, especially during COVID.
Oh, yeah.
That might change in 45 minutes, but I am really authentically, transparently telling you what I know right now to the best of my knowledge, and I'm not holding anything back. And I think the flip side of that is true. There are times that you're going to have to tell people the people that work with us are adults for the most part, and they needed to be treated like adults to say, some of this I can't share with you yet. We're not at a point where I can share that information, but I will tell you what I do know. And as soon as I can share more, I will. And I think that is very, very vital for leaders right now to be honest and to be authentic and to be transparent. And when they can't be transparent, I think everybody understands there are things you can't share, but just let that be known.
Be honest.
So people are aware you're not hiding things. You're just sharing the information that it's appropriate to share right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I so many times would have just loved to have heard, there is more, but we can't tell you right now. But when we can, we will. But here's what we can tell you right now. And I'm an adult, I understand that I can't be privy to everything. I'm not in that inner circle or whatever. But yeah, be honest with me. Treat me like an adult and as a person who can understand that, but keep me informed as well. I'm a staff nurse who wants to know as much as possible. And so tell me, and then be respectful of me as a person, but also be honest and just say, hey, I can't tell you everything, but here's what I can tell you. That would have been so huge if my leaders would have just said that.
I know. I agree.
Well, and sometimes they walk around like they're keeping secrets and you know it and nobody trusts them because it's all this weird whatever. I'm like, just be honest. Just be honest.
Well, and I found it's usually fear.
Yeah.
You're afraid to tell the front line something they already know. And I've learned that over my leadership journey too. It's like, oh, we better not discuss this. People are going to be upset. And for any of you that work in any department in perioperative services, the entire staff knows this already. And so does the medical staff.
Yep.
So you're keeping secrets about something that people already have information. And I think the second part of that would be for those experienced leaders, don't be afraid to own your leadership role. It is different than a staff role. And frankly, the staff expect you to act and show up different. So don't shy away from the fact that you are in a leadership position and you are the responsible person in that situation, instead of kind of like marginalizing it, or, yeah, I'm the manager, really you just have to own your position, own the authority and responsibility that comes with it. And at the same time, really recognize that people are looking for guidance and direction from their leadership, and they'll respect you for that. I think when you try to marginalize yourself or pass yourself off as somebody who's, really not making all those big decisions, that's somebody else. I think people are disappointed and say, well, I'm looking for more from my leaders. And I think today people are really looking for a lot from their leaders, because it makes the difference between someone staying in their job and leaving their job when they have a boss that they have trust and faith in.
I 100% agree.
What about when somebody amongst a peer group all of a sudden gets promoted and that whole weirdness follows? Can we talk about that?
That weirdness follows. It's so awkward. And, I think now that I'm in more of a senior leadership role, I think I approach it differently, because you have to see that people do like to be promoted from within. It's nice as an organization to say, we don't have to go out into the ether and pull someone in to this role. We've got talented people right here. But then all of a sudden, presto changeo, I was your peer. We were in the locker room. We were bashing Jen. And now she's in the office in there. He's over here at a board meeting. What does that mean? And so I really think you have to put that in the interview process. I actually had a recent situation like that. We had a leader who was looking to move into another role, and it was unbeknownst to me at the beginning, but then I was made aware of it. I had a lot of friends in the department that were on Facebook. They were all Facebook friends together. So we brought it up and we got, really honest about it and said, in this role, it's going to be difficult to have those Facebook friendships because you're accountable and responsible. And sometimes you're going to have to coach and counsel and performance manage. And that might be hard to do in the friend zone. So do you think that you can limit that and sort of create that bit of a barrier? And interestingly enough, she kind of went back and thought about it and said, you know what? No, I can't. Because you're right. It is weird. It's not only weird, it's lonely. And you have to find a new peer group at the level that you're working at. That doesn't mean you can't be friendly, especially for people that work in very small hospitals. The hospital that I'm with right now is smaller. And that really doesn't mean you can't interact. It just means you do have a level that you're working at. And, my husband always used to say this, and you'll probably have to cut this out of the video, but I will say it. He said, you really can't go out and have drinks with somebody that you might have to fire the next day. And it sounds pretty blunt. He's not in healthcare at all, but it's true.
Actually, I really like the way you put it, because, that's just the very core essence of it. You can't, because the rest of the staff, it's one thing that person is now out of the organization, right? So maybe it's like, we won't have to deal with it. It's everybody else.
Yep.
Because it looks and feels like betrayal to them, especially if they don't agree with the decision.
Yep. Or people kind of want some freebies. And I've seen this happen quite a bit too, which is why that new leader can benefit from having a partner and a buddy that they can mentor with, because people are like, well, come on, why can't I have that day off? And they really expect that you should be kind of giving them some extra consideration. But what I found really is that the people that you were working with, they may push you, they may ask you for something that probably isn't exactly, the right way. And they want to see and gauge if you're going to be fair and if you're going to handle it well. And so you can't play favorites, and you won't play favorites, which is why it does tie back in to having that buddy, so that you have somebody to bounce it off of and say, oh, great, now they're asking me for special things. And they're kind of getting mad at me because they still think, hey, you're my friend. Why won't you give me that day off? So I think having that mentor, and then also having that new leader be real plugged in with their own direct manager, helps them hurdle that. Sometimes you just have to role play through those situations. You have to warn them that those situations are coming. But I've had that happen. I've had my peers be promoted to be a CNO or a CEO when we were all directors the day before. And you kind of have to renorm your relationship. But I think we all expect our leaders to behave as leaders once they, agree to take that kind of position. We don't expect them to act like, the way they did before, because they're supposed to be leading, in that new role.
Jen, phenomenal interview. That's a great place to just put a nice bow on it, because I know everybody's thinking about that in the back of their minds, that first leap into leadership. You want to be in a comfortable environment that the one that you're working in, and at the same time, the virtue of the situation also presents a very uncomfortable position to be in. And if that's your peer group and that's your social life, that is a big loss, like you talked about. Like, it becomes lonely. It's important, I think, for everybody to have, friend relationships, the friend zone outside of work. But sometimes the work that we do as nurses, honestly, it bonds us together.
Yeah.
And so that makes, who else can you talk about, bodily fluids over dinner with? Right? Nobody.
Right.
Nobody.
And I don't know how to work this in. Maybe it fits, maybe it doesn't. I kind of would like to say to people that are considering leadership, or maybe people that have been in leadership and stepped back, don't be afraid to step out and try it. Especially right now, if you were in a leadership role and stepped back for personal or professional reasons, or maybe you've always thought about leadership, but you're very, very clinically experienced, I would encourage people to give it a try. It really is a continuum, and healthcare is always a place where you can move in and out of leadership roles. I've gone from VP roles back to director roles, to consultant roles. So I would highly encourage anybody who's thinking about it to go for it. Give it a try. Let yourself be in a leadership role. See if it fits you. And if it doesn't, you can always transition to something else. I've heard some of your podcasts, earlier this season. We have examples of people that have done that, where they've just really gone for different roles or stepped back. I would say, if you're standing on that diving board saying, me, the leader, I would jump, because people need leaders right now more than they ever have in healthcare. So if it's of interest to you, don't hold back.
Amen on that. We need lots of leaders right now. Jen, you seriously, this is a great way to wrap the season. I love your energy, and I want to thank you so much. It's so inspirational. Great job.
Oh, thanks. I loved spending time with you guys. I mean, I love being a leader. I want other people to love being leaders, and I want people to stay in healthcare because we need every one of us. And, hopefully listening to these podcasts give people sort of the energy and the resilience that they're looking for, to keep going.
That was Jennifer Misajet, COO, CNO at Mercy One. And Melanie, I really loved kind of the final point. I mean, so many great things in this interview, but that final point about, your career, and this is all tying in professional development. Your career is not one step up, one step up, one step up, one step up. And you hear the saying all the time, people get promoted to incompetence. They also get promoted to lack of desire. They find themselves in positions where they're like, oh, you know what? This just isn't for me. And they lose their love for what they've been doing. And I love that she's encouraging people to move into leadership positions by saying you're not stuck there. You can move around. And, she's currently a COO and a CNO, and she said she's gone from, VP and CNO level back down to director. And so, I think it's a lot more about cultural fit. It's about job fit. It's about even what's going on in your life. There are people that probably move into leadership positions and then maybe they choose to start a family and it's not a good fit for that period of time. You need to have the freedom as a professional to do the right things for not only your professional life, but your personal life. And she just totally opened that up as, a realm of possibility, and not only a realm, but one that's encouraged.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this kind of just sandwiches nicely with what Jamie Taryn said in episode 1. Professional development and growth is not necessarily linear, and it doesn't have to be one prescribed format. And there are seasons in our lives where we do one thing, and then we can do something else. And the beauty of nursing and the beauty of our profession is that you can try different things, you can learn new things, and you can do what works best for you. I am living proof that sometimes you get promoted into positions of leadership that you're just not cut out for, whether it's season of life or my own opinions of the position I had. But I didn't leave leadership. I just went to a different leadership role, and I did well and I loved it. But I found the leadership role that was a good fit for me, and it worked. And so there's so many opportunities, not only in leadership, but with what we were talking about today, where we can grow, where we can move into, and look for those opportunities, and don't be afraid to reach out and try it out and go give it a shot.
I'm going to say that this was the best season yet of First Case. And this doesn't just wrap up this show. It wraps up a phenomenal season. And I want to thank not only Jen, but all of the great quality guests and conversations that we had this season. This is going to be one. I'm going to go back and I'm going to be listening to these episodes for a long time. I took so much away from my own personal and professional development. I mean, I know we recorded this basically in a matter of 4 business days, Melanie, but it's been an eye opener for me, and it's been of great value. I hope it has been for all of you that have been listening this season as well. And, it's great to run into folks like Jen who have been listening to the episodes as well as our other guests. And it's quite flattering. And so I hope we continue to create great content for you all. And Melanie, you're the one that set all this up. So I owe you a huge thank you, for all of the setup time and speaking with these guests in advance and really laying out a very nice complimentary set of 8 phenomenal people with some really great interviews this season.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. This is a great topic. And the experts are out there. Finding them, though, and corralling them all for this season, I have enjoyed it. I got to talk to them all ahead of time, and then I got to interview them on the podcast again. So I got it twice, and then I took a lot of notes, and it's just fantastic. Lots of great content to benefit all of us.
Jen mentioned, that people get involved and do these things, to help refuel their passion and their energy. And this is definitely a goal of ours for our listeners, but sometimes it's equally as rewarding for us. So what a great season. I do want to remind everybody, download the smartphone app. This content lives forever there. And so you can absolutely come back to these years from now, even. That's the beauty of our smartphone app. And you can search for different episodes and topics in the future. But if you don't want to download yet another app on your phone, you can find us on Apple, Amazon, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, pretty much any podcast application if you want to search for First Case Media. And I do want to remind everyone, if this season had an impact, I would love to hear about it. Melanie would love to hear about it. We'll share your posts on social media. We can blind it if you don't want to be identified. But that kind of feedback goes a long way, not only for promoting the content to others, but really just, again, to give us the inspiration and the guidance to create great content for you all. So if you have topics or season themes that you think would be great, that you'd like to hear us cover, just send an email to info@firstcasemedia.com. On behalf of Melanie and myself, thank you for listening to this week's episode and this entire season on professional development here on First Case.